Have you ever wondered why some women seem to haunt a man long after she's gone? Not because of what she gave him, but because of what she awakened inside him. Something primal, ungoverned, and terrifyingly alive. She doesn't need to speak much. Her silence does the work. Her eyes hold stories his ego can't decode. And when she walks away, she leaves behind a silence that echoes like unfinished music. The sound of his shadow rising. There are women who don't chase, who don't explain, who don't beg for closure, and yet they live rent-free inside a man's psyche. These are not cruel women. They are mirrors. Jung once wrote that every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, the anima, the inner feminine that shapes his love, his longing, his fear. When a man meets a woman who embodies the fragments of his hidden self, she does not just attract him, she activates him. She becomes the key that unlocks the unconscious. This is where the dark feminine lives, not in wickedness, but in depth. Her allure is not in perfection, but in mystery. She awakens a man's shadow because she does not reflect his ego. She reflects what he's been running from, the shame, the desire, the unspoken wounds. When he looks at her, he doesn't just see beauty, he sees himself, refracted through a sacred mirror that will not lie, and that more than anything terrifies him. Most women are taught to soften themselves to be loved, to explain, to overgive, to become safe. But the woman who understands her own darkness does not dilute her essence to be understood. She carries an invisible gravity, an energy that says, I will not chase what is not aligned. She understands that attraction born of mystery is not manipulation. It is nature reclaiming her balance. When she enters a man's life, she doesn't comfort his ego. She disrupts it. He starts to dream differently. He feels restlessness in the quiet hours. He begins to question the roles he's been performing, the masks he's been wearing. This is not the comfort of love he's known. This is initiation. She does not ask for obedience or devotion. She demands truth. Her very presence becomes an alchemical fire that burns away illusion. Carl Jung taught that the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress or deny, holds the gold of transformation. But before it liberates, it torments. And so when a man encounters a woman who embodies the sacred feminine in her full emotional range, her silence, her sensuality, her self-possession, he feels both drawn and endangered. She doesn't fit neatly into his idea of good or bad. She blurs those lines. She whispers to his unconscious that perhaps love is not safety. It is awakening. The dark feminine is not cruel. She is simply complete. She does not seek validation because she has already descended into her own depths. She knows the language of loss and has made peace with it. She understands that the power of attraction is not in control, but in surrender. In knowing that energy cannot be chased, only mirrored. To stand in her presence is to be reminded that real love begins where comfort ends. And if you've ever been this woman, the one who loved deeply but refused to beg, the one who stayed silent when he expected drama, you already know the cost and the reward. You've felt the discomfort of being misunderstood, the loneliness of self-respect, the quiet power of detachment. You've seen how your absence teaches more than your words ever could. That is the essence of the dark feminine. She teaches through mystery, not explanation. To the unready man, she feels like danger. To the awakened man, she feels like destiny. Because she does not cater to his surface self. She speaks to his soul. And when she walks away, she leaves a mark not on his memory, but on his mythology. He may chase others. He may fill his life with noise, but a part of him will always return inwardly to that first moment he looked into her eyes and saw the truth. He was never in control. This is the beginning of his initiation, the birth of awareness that the feminine is not something to possess, but to understand. That love is not ownership, but reflection. That every obsession, every regret, every ache is simply the psyche's way of saying, there is something inside you yet unloved. And for the woman in the dark feminine, this is her power. Not to manipulate, but to illuminate. Not to dominate, but to awaken. Her stillness disarms, her absence transforms, her silence becomes scripture in the language of the soul. And those who encounter her will either evolve or escape, but never forget, because she doesn't live to be remembered. She lives to be real. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when a man begins to sense that he's no longer dealing with the external woman before him, but with something archetypal, something ancient that lives beyond her skin. Her words, her glances, even her indifference start to speak a secret language he cannot translate with logic. It's the realm of the unconscious, where symbols replace sentences and emotion reveals what intellect cannot bear to face. Jung called this the confrontation with the anima, the sacred feminine within. And when a woman carries her darkness gracefully, when she is neither seeking approval nor avoiding rejection, she becomes the living mirror of that inner figure. This is where fascination turns into obsession, for he cannot understand why she lingers in his mind. He thinks it's her beauty, her mystery, her detachment. But it's more than that. She has awakened his split, the rift between who he pretends to be and who he truly is. Her presence exposes the fragility of his confidence. Her silence forces him to hear his own noise. She doesn't punish him. She simply reveals the weight of his own unhealed masculine. Men who meet such women often describe it as both ecstasy and agony. One moment, he feels invincible. The next, utterly lost. Her gaze reminds him of his potential, but also his cowardice. Her warmth seduces, but her boundaries command. She will not become his validation machine. She will become his reflection. And in that reflection, he sees his need for control, his fear of surrender, his hunger for power disguised as love. You see, the dark feminine is not here to soothe a man's wounds. She is here to make him see them. She stands as both sanctuary and storm. She offers him depth, but only if he dares to drown. For Jung, this is the alchemical union of opposites, the confrontation that leads to transformation. The ego resists it because it means death. Death of illusion, death of pride, death of the small self that believes it can dominate love without first submitting to truth. To the woman who lives from this place, there is no need to play the good girl or the rebel. She understands polarity, not performance. Her power is not loud, it hums beneath her skin. She knows when to withhold, when to withdraw, when to become silence incarnate. For in that silence, a man hears his own chaos. And the one who is unready will call her cold. The one who is awakening will call her divine. Her energy does not chase, it invites. Not through effort, but through essence. When she walks into a room, something shifts. Not because of appearance, but because she has integrated what most deny. She has befriended her rage, embraced her longing, forgiven her past. She no longer fights for significance because she is significance. Her stillness becomes gravitational. She does not manipulate his attention. She commands it through presence. Every man who meets such a woman faces a choice, to retreat into comfort or to rise into consciousness. The first path leads back to the superficial, the games, the roles, the safety of shallow validation. The second leads into the unknown, into self-confrontation, humility, and soul. For when the dark feminine enters his life, she is not offering romance, she is offering evolution. She is the storm that clears the path for rebirth. And you, and if you've walked this road, know the weight of this role. To embody mystery is to be misunderstood, to stand firm in silence while others demand explanation, to let go of what you want in order to protect what is sacred. You are not cruel for being selective. You are discerning. You are not detached for refusing chaos. You are anchored. The world may call you intimidating, but what they really mean is you cannot be controlled. Men project onto such women their fantasies, fears, and forgotten desires. Some will worship her, others will resent her, but few will ever truly see her. Because to see her, they must first see themselves. And that is a journey most resist. Jung understood that projection is the beginning of relationship, but not the end. True connection arises only when projection dissolves, when both man and woman see each other not as ideals, but as mirrors of the soul. The dark feminine's greatest secret, then, is not in seduction, but in reflection. She does not enslave through charm, she liberates through truth. Her gaze dismantles illusion because she has already faced her own. She has sat with her loneliness, walked through rejection, and emerged sovereign. She is both ocean and flame, capable of nurturing or consuming, depending on how one approaches her. To love her is to enter the temple of authenticity, and not every man is ready for that. Many will try to possess her light without earning it through shadow work. They will romanticize her energy without respecting her boundaries. But the woman who has met herself cannot be bought, chased, or convinced. She does not yield to promises, only to presence. And that is why she awakens the shadow in every man she meets. Because in her, he senses what he's missing. Not a person, but a path toward wholeness, toward the buried truth he's been avoiding. She becomes both his muse and his mirror, his undoing and his liberation. And when she finally walks away, she leaves him not broken, but initiated, if he's wise enough to listen. There is something paradoxical about the power of the dark feminine. She is both healer and mirror, both wound and medicine. She does not intend to provoke transformation. She embodies it, and that embodiment alone is enough to draw men toward her like moths to flame. But this attraction is never purely romantic. It is metaphysical. It is the soul's yearning to reclaim what was lost in the split between the masculine and feminine, between ego and essence, between the mind's control and the heart's surrender. Carl Jung once said that, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The dark feminine is fate in human form. She appears when a man's soul can no longer bear the weight of his own denial, when his logic begins to crumble under the pressure of unacknowledged longing, when his heart aches for something real, not perfect, but real. And she comes not to comfort him, but to awaken him to his forgotten nature. You can feel this moment when it happens, that electric tension, that silent recognition. It is not lust alone, it is remembrance. His body remembers something his mind forgot, that the feminine is not to be conquered but communed with, that love is not control but dissolution. He will resist this truth at first. His ego will label her dangerous, unpredictable, too much. He will project his own fear of surrender onto her, calling her names meant to diminish her mystery. Complicated, intense, emotional. But beneath that fear lies fascination, because she represents freedom, the freedom he secretly craves but cannot yet embody. To her, his resistance is predictable. She's seen it before, the way men retreat behind sarcasm or detachment when faced with her stillness. She doesn't chase him back because she knows the difference between rejection and reflection. She understands that some men are not rejecting her. They're rejecting the part of themselves she awakens. They are not ready to face the chaos of feeling, the humility of self-awareness, the pain of confronting their own reflection. And yet, even as he runs, he cannot escape the imprint. Something in him shifts, a quiet rebellion against his own numbness. Her memory becomes a haunting presence that visits him in solitude. He wonders why he dreams of her laughter, why her silence echoes louder than any other woman's voice. That's because she didn't just touch his heart. She brushed against his unconscious, rearranged the architecture of his inner world. Once the shadow is stirred, it cannot be unseen. The dark feminine knows this. She doesn't rush the process because she knows time is the crucible of awakening. She understands that true power is not in demanding recognition, but in embodying truth. Her self-possession is not arrogance. It is mastery. The mastery of her emotions, her body, her energy. She has learned that vulnerability is not weakness, it's precision. She offers depth only to those who can hold it, and silence to those who cannot. When Jung described individuation, the process of integrating one's unconscious into awareness, he was describing what happens to both man and woman when they meet each other beyond ego. For the woman, individuation means reclaiming her sovereignty from the roles imposed upon her, the pleaser, the savior, the muse. She no longer plays archetypes unconsciously. She embodies them consciously, the lover without losing herself, the nurturer without self-erasure, the seductress without shame. To the man, this meeting is confrontation. He begins to see how his attraction to her is not about her at all. It is about his disowned desires, his unmet emotions, his fragmented self. She awakens his need for meaning, not comfort. She calls forth the warrior, the philosopher, the poet within him. But to rise into that, he must first face the part of himself he's hidden. The fear of rejection, the terror of inadequacy, the unhealed boy who still seeks his mother's approval in every woman's gaze. And this is where the alchemy occurs. Not in romance, but in realization. The dark feminine becomes the crucible in which the masculine is reforged. Her boundaries are the walls of that sacred container. Her silence, the fire that refines. The man who survives this encounter, not by conquering but by surrendering, emerges different. Not weaker but grounded. Not addicted but awakened. As for her, she walks away unchanged on the surface, yet deeper within. Every encounter teaches her discernment. Every connection refines her vibration. She learns that not all men are ready to see her, and that's not her burden. She doesn't apologize for being the catalyst, the storm, the stillness, for she knows the truth of her nature, that her energy is both blessing and test, medicine and mirror. And so she continues to move through life like a myth made flesh, soft but untamed, kind but uncompromising. Her power lies not in seduction, but in serenity. She is the embodiment of a law older than language, that what is real cannot be possessed, and those who try to own her energy will lose themselves within it. But those who dare to meet her as equals, not from ego, but from soul, will find that she does not destroy them. She resurrects them. When a man begins to awaken from the trance of projection, he often does so through loss. The loss of her presence, the absence that feels too alive to ignore. For the first time, he realizes that he was not addicted to her body, her beauty, or even her attention. He was addicted to the way she made him feel himself. In her energy, he felt both seen and confronted, desired and dismantled. She stirred what lay dormant beneath his surface, his longing to feel something real, raw, unfiltered. This is the cruel mercy of the dark feminine. She enters his life not to stay, but to serve as the mirror that reveals the cracks in his foundation. She doesn't destroy him. She exposes what was already broken. Jung would call this the eruption of the unconscious into consciousness, the moment when repression can no longer sustain the illusion of control. The man begins to question his past patterns, the superficial victories he once mistook for strength. He remembers how he tried to define power through dominance, only to find that real power is presence. And you, if you have lived this role, know that her leaving is not a punishment, but a passage. The man must descend into his own shadow to reclaim the parts of himself that were lost to pride and fear. The woman must return to her sovereignty, knowing that love is not meant to rescue, but to reveal. Their connection becomes less a romance and more a ritual, one that breaks both open in order to rebuild something sacred inside each. In this quiet devastation, the man confronts his reflection, the inner boy who was never taught how to hold emotion, who confused attention for affection and control for security. He begins to understand why her silence wounded him more than her words, because her silence forced him to listen to the voice within, the same voice he had long drowned out with noise, conquest, and distraction. The dark feminine's gift is not comfort, it is consciousness. She teaches by leaving space, by not filling the silence, by refusing to soften her truth to spare his ego. Her restraint is her power. Her detachment is not indifference, it is discipline. She has learned that love given without boundaries becomes bondage, and so she loves through clarity, not chaos. To those who observe her from the outside, she appears untouchable. But the truth is, her power was born in heartbreak. She was not always this composed. She once bled from the same wounds she now helps others face. She has been abandoned, underestimated, misunderstood, and every betrayal carved wisdom into her bones. The woman who walks in her dark feminine has suffered, but she has suffered awake. That is what makes her presence so magnetic, not her perfection, but her peace. For a man to meet such a woman and see her, truly see her, requires the death of his old self. The man who measures worth in validation, who mistakes intensity for intimacy, who confuses control with connection, that man cannot survive her gaze. He must die into his truth. And from those ashes rises something different. Not the seducer, not the pursuer, but the conscious masculine. The conscious masculine does not fear the dark feminine. He honors her. He recognizes in her silence a reflection of his own inner stillness. He no longer seeks to conquer her, he seeks to understand her. He realizes that her mystery is not there to frustrate him, but to lead him back to the mysteries within himself. This is what Jung meant when he wrote of the sacred marriage, the conjunctio, the union of opposites within the psyche. But few reach that stage. Most will retreat before they are ready. They will call her too complicated, too distant, or too spiritual, when in truth she was simply honest. They will return to easier loves, those that require no mirror, no silence, no shadow work. Yet the memory of her remains. Because once a man has glimpsed the sacred through the vessel of a woman who embodies her darkness with grace, he can never again be satisfied by surfaces. And she carries on. She doesn't cling to those who failed to meet her depth. She blesses them silently, for she knows her energy is an initiation, not an invitation. Every encounter becomes part of her refinement, every heartbreak another step toward her wholeness. The dark feminine does not seek closure, she is closure. She understands that endings are simply initiations in disguise. For her, love is not a destination, but a mirror of evolution. She has stopped asking, "Why didn't he stay?" and started asking, "What did he awaken?" She knows that men do not come to her to complete her story. They come to remember their own, and in that remembering she fulfills her purpose. There is no bitterness left in her, only knowing, only calm, only the quiet understanding that everything she loses was never hers, only passing reflections in the mirror of transformation. And perhaps this is her final secret, the one that makes her untouchable, unforgettable, and free. There is a rare kind of peace that comes after the storm, not the peace of comfort, but the peace of clarity. The dark feminine lives in that space. She no longer seeks to be understood, for understanding requires translation, and she no longer speaks in words that can be translated. Her life has become a language of presence, energy, and silence. To the uninitiated, she appears mysterious. To the awakened, she is transparent. Every gesture, every withdrawal, every glance is deliberate, not performative, but aligned. She has shed the armor of pretense. She no longer explains her worth to those who cannot perceive it. She does not chase love. She attracts resonance. She does not demand loyalty. She embodies integrity. In her presence, pretense cannot breathe. Carl Jung taught that the integration of shadow is the path to wholeness. But for the feminine, this journey is especially sacred, because the world taught her to fear her darkness, her anger, her sensuality, her independence, her intuition, and to label those energies as too much. She has spent lifetimes suppressing the very aspects that made her magnetic. The dark feminine reclaims them all. She does not destroy the light, she completes it. Her sensuality is no longer performance. It is awareness. The knowing that her body is not an ornament, but an instrument of truth. She is not seductive to manipulate. She is seductive because she is real. Her emotions flow through her without apology. When she is soft, she melts barriers. When she is fierce, she burns illusions. Both are love, different frequencies of the same current. Men feel this instinctively. They may not understand why they can't forget her, but the body knows. The nervous system remembers authenticity. He can meet 100 others, yet none will vibrate at the same frequency. Because she didn't just enter his life, she entered his psyche. She left him not with fantasy, but with awareness. And once awareness enters, ignorance cannot return. The man who truly learns from her will begin to shift, slowly, quietly, painfully. He will confront his patterns. The way he used validation to escape vulnerability. The way he confused dominance with strength. He will see that what he called control was fear. What he called love was attachment. What he called logic was avoidance. Her presence made these truths visible, and her absence makes them unforgettable. This is why the dark feminine must be sovereign. She cannot stay to nurse every man she awakens. She must walk her path not as punishment, but as preservation. Her role is not to heal his wounds. It is to remind him that he can. Her detachment is not coldness, it is faith. Faith in his potential, even when he cannot yet see it. She leaves so that he may finally meet himself without distraction. But this sovereignty is not without ache. The woman who carries her darkness with grace has known profound loneliness. She has cried oceans of the world, never saw. She has learned that deep love often requires deeper letting go. She has chosen truth over comfort, solitude over compromise, peace over attention. That is her crucifixion and her resurrection. Each heartbreak has carved a space within her for wisdom to take root. Over time, her energy becomes different. She no longer reacts, she responds. She no longer pursues, she allows. She no longer fights to be chosen, she chooses. There is a stillness about her that makes others uneasy because it exposes the franticness of their own seeking. Yet within that stillness lies her greatest power, the power to attract without effort, to influence without intention, to inspire without needing to be seen. She has become what Jung called the individuated self, the psyche that has transcended polarity. She is no longer ruled by shadow or light, by masculine or feminine, by love or fear. She flows between them effortlessly, a living embodiment of balance. She does not try to be feminine, she simply is. She does not fear masculine energy. She honors it because she has integrated her own. In her presence, men remember what sacred masculinity feels like. Not dominance, but direction. Not authority, but authenticity. She does not mother them or submit to them. She meets them, soul to soul, shadow to shadow. And in that meeting, both rise. The dark feminine teaches that attraction is not about charm, appearance, or strategy. It is the meeting of energies that have done their inner work. It is the magnetic pull between wholeness and wholeness. Two sovereign beings who no longer seek completion in each other, but expansion through each other. This is the kind of love that cannot be lost because it was never based on possession. It is freedom disguised as intimacy, silence that speaks louder than words, a gaze that says, I see you, not as who you pretend to be, but as who you are becoming. And when she loves, it is without fear, because she has faced every ending and found herself still whole, because she has died to illusion and been reborn in truth, because she knows that love is not what binds her, it is what flows through her. She no longer begs to be understood. She no longer needs to be remembered. She lives to embody. There is a sacred calm that follows awakening, the kind that feels like standing on the edge of a cliff at dawn, the wind cutting through silence, and knowing that nothing and no one owns you anymore. This is where the dark feminine lives when her evolution is complete. She has gone through every layer of illusion, love that was control, desire that was projection, validation that was disguise, and now stands in the rare air of self-possession. She moves differently now. Her energy no longer fluctuates based on who stays or who leaves. The world may still test her, but it no longer defines her. She no longer fights for her worth in the arena of approval. Instead, she observes. She knows that everything external, attraction, rejection, attention, is a mirror of the inner dance between her own masculine and feminine energies. When those are balanced, nothing outside can disturb her center. The woman who has embraced her dark feminine is not cruel, though the uninitiated will often call her heartless. They mistake her composure for arrogance, her boundaries for walls, but she knows the truth. Love without self-respect is not love, it's self-abandonment, and she will never abandon herself again. That promise has become her quiet religion. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For the dark feminine, that privilege is earned through fire, through rejection, betrayal, solitude, and rebirth. She has sat alone in the wilderness of her own emotions and discovered something most never find, that peace is not given, it is chosen, that worth is not proven, it is remembered. When she enters a room now, she carries that remembrance like light wrapped in silk. Men still notice her, but the quality of their gaze changes. The unready ones sense danger, not the kind that threatens, but the kind that awakens. The grounded ones sense presence, the calm magnetism of a woman who no longer needs to be seen to exist. She does not seduce, she simply allows herself to be seen without effort. And that paradoxically is irresistible. Her allure is not in her body, though it moves with awareness. It's not in her voice, though it carries gravity. It's in her energy, an energy that whispers of freedom, of knowing, of unshakable self-trust. The kind of energy that says, I have lost everything false and found everything real. When men meet her now, something inside them still stirs, but it's different from before. The unhealed will still seek to possess her, to draw her into their chaos, but she will not step into that cage. She has learned that empathy without discernment is self-destruction. The awakened masculine, however, will recognize her not as conquest, but as mirror. He will not try to contain her. He will meet her. Together they will stand not in power struggle, but in polarity. Two souls aware of their own wholeness, choosing connection from abundance rather than lack. This is the true meaning of the sacred union Jung spoke of. Not a merging that erases individuality, but a meeting that magnifies it. A love born not of need, but of recognition. The dark feminine does not seek completion because she is already complete. Her love is not dependency, it is overflow. When she gives, it is not to be seen, but because she sees. She knows that every man who entered her life, the tender ones, the broken ones, the arrogant ones, was never punishment or mistake. Each was a mirror showing her where she still needed to reclaim herself. Every heartbreak was an initiation, every silence a lesson. The one who betrayed her taught her to trust herself. The one who left taught her to stay with herself. The one who couldn't meet her depth taught her the value of solitude. And now she walks in a state of quiet knowing, not the knowing of intellect, but of soul. She trusts timing. She honors endings. She moves like water around resistance. Her emotions are no longer chaos, they are compass. She doesn't chase, demand, or plead because she understands the rhythm of energy. What is meant for her will always return, transformed. The man who once feared her silence now understands its wisdom. The woman who once feared her intensity now envies her peace. The world that once tried to tame her now studies her. And through it all, she remains unmoved. Not indifferent, but grounded in truth. Because the dark feminine's journey is not about domination. It's about integration. It's about dissolving the illusion that power and softness are opposites. It's about remembering that to be magnetic, you must be whole. And to be whole, you must be willing to face your shadow and love it back into light. She is not the woman who needs to be chosen. She is the woman who chooses. She is not the woman who waits to be loved. She is the woman who is love, distilled, refined, and free. And when she finally stands in that power, the entire universe rearranges around her vibration. Because she has learned the final truth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.